Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Marguerite Winter, and I am the Manager of Public Programs and Partnerships at the Chicago Architecture Biennial. I'm pleased to welcome you to the first of CAB's In Dialogue series, supported by Hyman Auctions, which take place virtually every Tuesday. The fourth edition of the Chicago Architecture Biennial, The Available City, is a framework for a collaborative, community-led design approach that presents transformative possibilities for vacant urban spaces that are created with and for local residents. Through workshops, installations, activations, performances, and programs, The Available City invites a critical global conversation that asks how design can foster collective engagement and agency to identify new forms of shared space in urban areas. This evening's program, The Transformative Possibilities of the Available City with Craig Wilkins and David Brown, further explores this framework while asking, what is the future of the 10,000 city-owned vacant lots in Chicago? And how can a community-oriented approach shift perspectives in how cities are built and vacant urban spaces are transformed? Architect, author, academic, and activist, Dr. Craig L. Wilkins currently serves on the faculty at the University of Michigan Tubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning. A 2020 American Landscape Association Bradford Williams Medal recipient, and 2017 Smithsonian Cooper Hewitt Design Museum National Design Award winner. He is the author of The Aesthetics of Equity, Notes on Race, Space, Architecture, and Music, and Diversity Among Architects, From Margin to Center. His creative practice specializes in engaging communities in collaborative and participatory design processes. The former director of Tubman College Detroit Community Design Center and founder of the award-winning Studio Detroit HS, an initiative created to introduce underrepresented high school students to careers in design. He is particularly interested in the production of various forms of space and understanding how publicly accessible and transponsive design can radically transform the trajectory of lives and environments, particularly for those on the margins of society. His award-winning design work has been featured in such publications as the Washington Post, the Miami Herald, Houston Chronicle, The Atlantic, and Fast Company. His critical essays and commentary have been published in the Journal of Architectural Education, International Review of African American Art, Art South Africa, Volume, Minneapolis Star Tribune, and Detroit News, among others. The recipient of the 2008 Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture's Collaborative Practice Award and the 2010 Fellowship, he is currently creative director of the Wilkins Project, a social justice strategic design alliance that provides architectural, urban design, and planning services, public interest design solutions, and expertise in engaged public discourse. David Brown is the artistic director for the 2021 Chicago Architecture Biennial. Brown is a Chicago-based designer, researcher, and educator. His work investigates non-hierarchical, flexible, and variable approaches to urban design within the available city, and ongoing speculation of the potential of Chicago's city-owned vacant lots. Brown's work has been exhibited in the Venice Architecture Biennial, the Chicago Cultural Center Expo 72, the first Chicago Architecture Biennial in 2015, and received a grant from the Graham Foundation in 2011. Writing includes the books Noise Orders, Jazz, Improvisation, and Architecture, and essays Curious Mixtures in Center 18, Music and Architecture, Architecture and Music. And Lots Will Vary in the Available City, in the Oxford Handbook of Critical Improvisation Studies. Brown has lectured on his work at Columbia University's Center for Jazz Studies and is taught at Florida A&M University and Rice University. He is currently a professor in the School of Architecture at the University of Illinois, Chicago. At the end of the program, we will take some time for questions for our speakers. So please feel free to use the Q&A function at any time for questions throughout the program. Please note that this evening's program is being recorded and will be made available for you to revisit on our website and YouTube channel. I will now hand it over to David and Craig. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marguerite. So Craig, how are you doing? It's good to see you again. And I guess I should say thank you for coming out last week. It was nice to see your face, see a friendly face out in the audience and get to spend some time with you. You got to come off mute.
Yeah, no, there were lots of friendly faces out there for you. It was good. I enjoyed it. There were, no, and as it should be. Listen, I'm going to say this up front, and I'm going to be unabashed in saying this, and it may color how people see the rest of this conversation. And maybe I'm not sorry for that, but I think this is a critical moment. This is I would say an amazing turn for biennials in general, but certainly for the Chicago Biennial. Getting this work out of an institution, not that there's anything wrong with that, but getting it out into the city is, it's groundbreaking. And I can't applaud you and the board enough for sort of making this happen. And I hope they never, ever go back to the sort of, institutionalized display of architecture as art, as theory, as object. This is architecture both as a noun and a verb. And I can't applaud everybody involved enough for making this happen. So.
Well, I will say on behalf of everybody involved, the board and all the contributors, thank you. I think that was the ambition, but it's also nice to hear from somebody born and raised in Chicago, the appreciation for the work. And it's a kind of, it was a great moment to me in terms of, I think, the whole year's been maybe a little bit anxiety producing in terms of, I think, just kind of the fact that we were going outside the cultural center. And I think finding spaces and then finding designers, and then I think even just the kind of time it takes to maybe the additional time and logistics it takes to do the installs out in sites rather than in the cultural center. Although I think Rachel Kaplan would probably also have lots of stories about the complexities of getting things in and out of the cultural center. My understanding is no two doors are quite the same size. But so here it's maybe that there aren't the kind of door restrictions and size restrictions, but I think the fact that we are across so many territories or spaces across the city means that everybody was kind of pushed to a limit in a way. And I should also, when I say contributors too, I really want to thank all the fabricators that were helping out and assisting with the work too. Because I think, again, it is a different, it is, as you're saying, a different biennial in terms of being out and around the city, and also working in sites presented complications that I think the biennial hadn't necessarily encountered before.
Yeah, it was a Herculean effort. And again, like I'm just saying, to everybody involved, they should feel immensely proud of what they were able to pull off. And I think, these are seeds that will grow. that will grow into things that who knows what they will grow into. But they certainly, you're planting seeds in the city rather. And again, I'm not trying to make any value judgments here, but rather than sort of going to see something and then putting the onus on the person who sees it to go back and do something about it. This is actually, you can engage in something that's already happening on the ground, which is a lot easier to do. So kudos to everybody who participated in this, and to you for, in a sense, proposing it, and to the board for saying, okay, we're gonna fly by the seat of our pants on this one and see how it works out.
Yeah, I think fortunately I've been, I guess I was laughing a little bit. Your bio goes quite long, and I feel like in hindsight, as I reflected on things over the last year, I realized I really kind of concentrate on a couple of things at length, and maybe move glacially. So I think the fact that I have been working on this for so much time, and that it, in some way, I say 10 years, or we say 10 years, but I think it also goes back to work that I was doing a lot earlier in terms of creating the context. I think is part of the reason why, even though, yes, it's a big task, there was a kind of comfort with it. Or I think in some ways the biggest task was going from a couple of sites that I had been in organizations that I had been in conversation with to really finding several organizations, and in some ways, I think getting outside of one neighborhood. So rather than just being in North Lawndale, to really, I think, meet the scale of the biennial, to be in more than, or as a citywide thing, to be in more than one neighborhood. And then I think too, really trying to, or I was happy to find organizations that enabled there to be a diversity of spaces. And so it's not that there's a singular sensibility of what collective spaces or outdoor spaces could be, that there's actually a variety that I think aids in there being this kind of both, I think as you're talking, a kind of ease of access and entering in and thinking about the work. But then I think too, in thinking about the work across the set, that it can in fact spark ideas amongst residents just as much as, and other organizations, just as much as within designers. And so I think really embraces a kind of wide scale architectural thinking, or thinking about the possibilities of architecture across a wide spectrum.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Well, not so much interesting. I mean, it's a clear understanding and critique of what you intended and what happened and what is happening. So, I've read some of the early. I don't know if review is the right word, but some of the early kind of press about the biennial. And what bothers me about it, I mean, it's across the board positive, but what bothers me is that in a couple of places, I can't remember. Well, I actually do remember one who wrote it, but I'm not here to put them on blast. But there was a comment about, well, a lot of these projects are about community gardens. And it irritated me to hear that, because, to read that, because it was, the way I read it was kind of a backhanded dismissal of work being done in communities and neighborhoods. And I think the critic or the journalist was looking at this through a particular lens that I think is ill-advised. Yes, these might be, in a sense, community gardens, if you want to categorize them that way. But they are really about, in my opinion, they're about creating a commons. They're about creating a space, you know, a place where in most of these neighborhoods, they just don't exist. And so, you know, it's really about, again, creating this commons, it's about life, it's about health, you know, about the ability to feed one's family so that, you know, you can spend, you know, other funds, your limited funds, on other things. It's not, you know, just sort of this kumbaya moment. It's a survival strategy. It's a you know, there a lot of times they're, you know, the grocery stores, through no fault of their own, they don't get the best choices of meat and vegetables, and they don't stay as long, and they don't stay, they perish faster than other places. You know, this is a way in which people are saying to the city, you know, this is what we need, and so if you're not going to provide this for us, we're going to provide it ourselves. And this notion of, in a sense, dismissing that agency, that desire to just sort of, you know, in a sense, maybe use space in ways that it's not supposed to be used, because space is life. You know, this is where all society's benefits come from. Your leisure, your food, your job. Access to space is absolutely essential to live your best life. And so it just sort of irritated me that folks, you know, that there were these critiques that, you know, like, this isn't architecture, or this is a lesser kind of architecture. No, it is not a lesser kind of architecture. It's exactly what architecture should be doing. It should be allowing people to live their best life. And so you know, I don't know why I got on this, but it just sort of, you know, the idea that architects should be working in neighborhoods and communities and talking to folks about what it is that they actually need and try to address that. It seems, it's crazy to me that it seems radical. It shouldn't be radical. It should just be foundational. So yeah, I mean, you know, there were just a couple of those reviews, which again, overwhelmingly positive. They just sort of positioned this as it was sort of like a backhanded compliment, and I think it should be it should be embraced as the objective, not sort of this extra thing. It is the thing.
Yeah, I think, to me, picking up on that, what I appreciated with the gardens that are some of the sites is a recognition of how this space that wasn't necessarily directly about growing food, but was a space within the garden, how it actually began to advance the mission of the garden, which I think is very much along the lines that you're talking about, in terms of that the garden is a way of growing food, but it's also a way of engaging others, and operating as this kind of commons. And I think learning about gardening together, and then in a way that the addition of a space that may be more about gathering and may be more about other activities, such as a space for a classroom or discussion, was recognized as a way in which it could be a space for those activities in and of itself, but it also advanced the mission and idea of the garden, that by coming there for some other activity, you would encounter the garden and then potentially start to learn more about, or especially if you maybe had an interest, or maybe even if you didn't have an interest, that you begin to learn about gardening. And I think about healthy food and potentially how to prep healthy food as well. And so it is something that is multi-layered. And so not thinking exclusively about gardening as the growing of food, but as this kind of sharing of information. And I think a lot of these spaces in different ways are about sharing information. To me, that's both in the exchange that's taking place with community residents and organizations and designers, but I think also, to me, the range of spaces is important because it's not exclusively about access to one kind of space. They're all outdoor spaces, but they do have different types of activities. And so there's also this idea that by going to the spaces, having encounters with others, that you maybe begin to be exposed to areas of interest or kinds of interest that you hadn't been exposed to before. And that can, to me, be transformative in terms of really finding types of ideas or types of work and activity that you want to subsequently pursue. And so to me, that's just as valuable in terms, and potentially that's also sparking interest in pursuing design and pursuing architecture, but also potentially in other directions as well. But that the experience begins to be something that can be transformative just as much as the fact that you now have spaces that you can engage and encounter. So to me, I think that supports this idea of what you're talking about in terms of kind of live space and a type of urbanism, and to me also a type of urbanism. And that's ultimately what I think this is. It's a different form of urbanism and a different form in which architecture can, or different scale at which architecture can work, that's vital to how a city can work and vital to communities as well.
Yeah, you know, and I don't mean, for those who have not had a chance yet to visit the sites of the biennial, I would first of all, I would encourage you to do that. But I also want to say that this isn't, not all the sites are about that, which is another reason why I was irritated by the critique. But it you know, what you mentioned is exactly right. It's like, you know, I'm the guy who does potatoes. The person over there does tomatoes. The young lady over there does something else. These are people that I may have never met in my daily routine, but they're in my neighborhood. So in a sense, you're talking about, you know, these spaces where you like tangibly grow food, but you also perhaps intangibly grow a neighborhood. You grow a community in this space. You know, the effort to, you know, put your hands in the ground and, you know, sort of, partner with somebody and share information. The conversation doesn't stop there. It grows, right? Now you have a friend that maybe is a block and a half away that you never would have met before. Somebody who's down the block that, you know, they work on the north side, you work on the south side, that your daily routine you probably would never pass. So it's a way in which, you know, you grow a neighborhood and a community, and you create kind of an identity. So yes, it's, you know, it's a community garden if you want to look at it in its most technical sense. But if you look at it in its the possibilities of it, why it exists and why it's important, it becomes multifold. And you know, these are the sort of, you know, in a sense, the small things that design and architecture can do that have huge impacts and across the board in whatever kind of neighborhood you're designing, but they actually have major impacts in those places that are marginalized, that are on the edge, they don't get a lot of attention. Like I saw, I think it was over at Soil Lab. There was a performance at Soil Lab when I went to see it on Saturday, and there were at least 3 or 4 people who I assume were from the neighborhood and community. And they were confused. I mean, I could see that they were confused. Like, is this for us? Can I come over here? Can I not come over here? And in a way, it broke my heart. But before I left, they had tentatively moved into this space and began to, in a sense, enjoy the benefits of it. And to me, that is the kind of positive influence that taking the biennial outside of an institution and placing it in a city that allows people to go like, yeah, this is for me. I don't have to get on the train. I don't have to go to the center. I don't have to feel uncomfortable, perhaps in this space that I don't really know anything about. This is actually in my neighborhood. I can come to it every single day. And, I can engage the designers and talk about the other kinds of things that maybe could happen here. It's in a sense, it makes architecture democratic. And it shows that, that it can care if it wants to. It can care about those who don't often have a voice, who don't often think that good design is for them. And for me, this is the kind of influence that I crave for this profession, that we recognize the kind of impact, the kind of power that we have with our skill sets, and that we don't just give it to the highest bidder, that we provide that for everybody.
Well, I think a couple of things come to mind. One, to go, hopefully everybody saw a little bit of maybe the set of trees with the fences that was showing a moment ago. That's a project called Witness Trees by Hood Design Studio. But I raised that because, Craig, as you were talking, it brought to mind, I was out there a couple of days last week, just checking on it. And at one point I was taking a photo, and this guy got out of his truck, and he's like, "Hey, what is that?" And I was explaining it to him. And at first, I wasn't sure if he was just kind of wanting to ask why was it there, but he was really just kind of curious. He was curious in terms of realizing that it was different and wanting to know why something that was different was there, and then also feeling that it was art, and not quite knowing exactly what it was supposed to do, but really appreciated that it was something that was in his neighborhood. And I think beginning to show different possibilities than what everyone sees as familiar within that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it literally the to a certain degree, this facial expression that I saw in a couple of sites, not just Soil Lab, but a couple of sites. Soil Lab just had more of them. It was like, is this for me? Can I actually participate in this? Do I have to pay a ticket? Do I have to, and yes, it's for you. Yes, yes, it's for you.
Right.
Yes, it is. I think it just opens up space for people to think differently about the possibilities of their life. And if architecture is not about that, then I don't know what it's about.
Right. And to me, I think too, what's important is ultimately these are they are kinds of small architecture. And so I think they also just demonstrate what can be the kind of power of small architecture, that it doesn't necessarily need to be something that is a super large new construction and investment. I think especially as it begins to align with what are activities and maybe helps some organizations that are already working in different neighborhoods and trying to engage different individuals in the neighborhood. It actually helps them begin to promote those activities and reveal those activities compared to being within kind of four walls and perhaps hidden. And I think there's both the kind of immediate activities that they're able to present in those spaces, but I think this too was a good example. Soil Lab is right next to Wyman's cycle or bike box, which has the spaces by Saku Cook, and so you were getting this kind of a lot of, which is this project here, a lot of individuals were going back and forth between the two.
Yeah.
And so you get this kind of these kind of casual encounters. This space wasn't necessarily activated with an activity, but it was getting activated from the spillover for some of the Soil Lab activity.
Yeah, these sort of small interventions, what I typically call these urban acupunctures, right? They can aggregate. You know, you don't like have to. It's not like if you can't do something huge, then don't. It's sort of this kind of idea of go big or go home. Well, you know, going big is a worthy aspiration. But you know, these sort of small punctures, these kind of small spaces that relieve the pressures of everyday life can aggregate to become like this is, you know, Soil Lab is next to Seku's piece, which is also that's, you know, right next door
right
to
next to this.
CA's. So now you've got this synergy between these spaces, right? You got this sort of like it's not just one thing, it's three things, and maybe it becomes five things, and maybe it becomes a block, and maybe it becomes, you know, a destination point. So it doesn't have to start out that way. It can grow.
Right.
And that's, you know, I think that's sort of the power of, well, first of all, this is sort of the power of design, but it's also the power of engaging people, right? Engaging communities. For the most part, and this is just sort of my history, that folks are really initially, when they work with you or work with me, they're initially interested in the now. Like, this is what we need right now, right? But in that process, and if you can actually, that whatever that now is comes to fruition, then they begin to think bigger. They begin to think, okay, well, maybe we can add this, and maybe we can do that. Maybe, you know, would you work with us on this? It's sort of this seeding of changing the narrative in a place. It doesn't happen all at once, but, you know, successes build on successes. And this is one of the things that I'm really sort of excited about, the projects that are here, because not all of them are designed to be temporary. They are designed to grow and be built on, and this is a phase one of a multi-phase sort of you know, a proposition for a neighborhood or for a community that you know, it's starting out with a lot of headwind. It's with a lot of, well, not headwind, wind behind it. It's starting out with a lot of energy, a lot of like, yeah, let's do this. So again, you know, I'm excited by the projects that were presented and the possibilities of them going forward.
Yeah, I think you're talking about, in terms of both that urbanism that you were talking about, that is a direct intention of the available city as a proposition related to all of the city-owned vacant land, that one can begin to get that kind of density that's present at the three sites along Pulaski now, but really potentially present within a number of these sites. Because there really is this opportunity and understanding that, or the general proposal is that all of the city-owned land in the neighborhoods where these projects are located, as well as other neighborhoods could in fact host and support similar spaces that are implemented by community organizations. And so it is something that can happen now, but also is intended to happen incrementally. And I do think that I was really pleased because this is something I've been trying to do for a few years now. And so I think with the biennial hitting a kind of scale in terms of being able to present 15 spaces or sites, 15 spaces within 12 sites, I think is something that really starts to talk about the scale and the possibility. So even as you encounter one, there's the engagement and thinking that it brings, but I think too, really being able to demonstrate that this is something that can happen over time. It is something that can happen fairly quickly, that this has been effectively less than a year's process. And so I think can begin to have a kind of immediate impact. And I think can begin to complement what are larger ambitions relative to the city and its work, as you're talking, say, in Invest Southwest, which are larger structures, and so also take a larger time frame and period. And so I think that balance of what can happen now, how can the things that happen now spur thinking about what else can happen, and how that might be complemented by larger scale work, and or within this proposal could also continue as at the smaller scale, but how that accumulates into a new urban landscape is something that I'm interested in, and interested in continuing beyond the biennial. And to me, I think going back to what you were saying early on, I think the biennial is interested in really starting to have a more continuous presence, rather than appearing, I think, every other year from September to maybe December or January, that it has a greater awareness and presence, or there's a greater awareness and presence of it as a organization that's operating continuously. And I think looking to continue some of the same work as well. And so I think it is something that I hope everyone begins to understand as a start, and a start that has possibilities in multiple directions.
Yeah, I've a couple things that I was thinking about when you were talking here is that one is that this is not just about the spaces in Chicago. This can happen in Detroit. It can happen in Los Angeles. It can happen in Houston. It can happen in a number of different ways. And us as architects and designers and landscape architects and artists and the whole sort of allied disciplines can really begin to think about how do we leverage our skill sets to really impact a location. A lot of times larger firms, and I don't know if I can speak specifically to landscape architecture, but a lot of larger firms, they work in places they don't live. They don't get the chance to really see those projects. They are what they are, and I'm not knocking those at all, because you gotta feed your family and pay your employees and things of that nature. But these sort of smaller seedlings, this sort of acupuncture is also critically important to at the very least for folks to recognize that architecture and the benefits of architecture and design are democratic, that they are not only for those who have gobs of money and they want to sort of create whatever it is they want to create, whether it's a hotel or a museum or a neighborhood or whatever, that it's for us as well. It's for us of limited means who you know, Majora Carter mentioned that this quote that she heard that someone said to her, that you shouldn't have to leave your neighborhood to live in a better one. And I think that in and of itself is a challenge and a proposition to the profession. How do you make that true? How do you make that real? How is it possible that through what we know and our our skill sets and abilities and across the board to make that a real thing?
Right.
And so that's one of the things I enjoy about the work in the biennial this year is that they begin to answer that question, or at the very least address that question. I don't know if it's answered, but they certainly sort of address that. And the second thing I wanted to say is that I hope, I'm kind of going to put people on the spot here. I hope that the next director, or however the biennial goes in the future, that this is in some way a part, if not the thing, that becomes foundational to the curation in the next 2 years, 4 years, or 20 years, is that it actually challenges the designers to think about the city as a participant, as the place where your work lasts and has impact. It's not just the photograph on the wall and the award you might win or what you put on your website. It's actually 5 years later going to a place and seeing people enjoy it and seeing people recognize, yeah, this is for me. This it wasn't just an installation. It is something, yeah, like Jermaine's piece. This isn't just an installation. This is for me. I get to enjoy it. I get to play on it. I get to kick it. I get to, I know he knows this. I get to graffiti it. I get to do, I get to do this because it's in my neighborhood and it's for me, right? It's not going to, 2 weeks in Chicago or however long the video until December, and then it gets moved someplace. This is here. It's mine. I get to do something with it.
Yeah, and I think to me, it's also just recognition of different scales and kinds of architecture, rather than thinking that it's a singular scale and operates through a singular kind of model of development. That there can be scales that can, I think, going back to something that you were saying, that can address different neighborhoods and what are the resources in different neighborhoods, so that you do get that end result that one can begin to recognize that you don't, or see that you don't have to move to a different neighborhood to begin to have a better life or better resources. That there are different types of resources. They might manifest themselves in different ways in terms of architecture, but that they can in fact be comparable to one another in terms of the opportunities they present in terms of spaces. And then I think how they engage you in terms of, again, to me, just as much engage and challenge you in your thinking, and really thinking about what are your interests and what are things that you can do.
Yeah, I and this is, in a sense, this is a kind of a challenge again. So maybe not so much a challenge.
Oh, yeah, and I think you get to make all the challenges you want in terms of to the biennial in terms of what they.
Yeah, I'm not the curator. I don't have to be diplomatic, right?
Yep.
This is a one-off for me, right?
Right.
But it's kind of it's sort of, what was I going to say? I mean, it's kind of it's a challenge to the profession to sort of think about architecture not simply as a noun, but a verb. like when you are engaging people in the conversation about, how you can best serve that community or how you can best impact, whether it may not turn out to be a building. It may turn out to be a space. It may turn out to just be educating people about the process so that when they're ready, they can take it to the next step. They can take it to the next level, that they believe that they have some ownership and they understand the process and they're empowered by that. To me, that's practicing architecture as well. I don't know that architecture always has to end in an object. It is both a noun and a verb. And again, I think these I don't know if I would call, are they entries or I don't know what to call this this work this year, but all these projects I think have some part of that in them, that the folks who have participated in this feel a little bit more empowered. They feel a little bit more knowledgeable. They feel a little bit more confident in their conversations about the impact of design and the things that they want. And they can build on that rather than having something that they react to or having something that is put upon them. They can now have something proactive that they can actually say, well, yeah, we did this, so perhaps we can do something else. Perhaps we can build on that. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm in a sense sort of repeating myself here, and so hopefully we can get to the question so I don't continue to ramble on. But I just think that's such in a sense a radical thing, but such a profoundly necessary and almost a no-brainer for a city like Chicago.
Right. And I was going to say, in some ways, what you're talking about is, in maybe part of what the biennial helps to show is what you're talking about is a simple thing. But even as you're saying, it's radical, that it is something that is pretty simple and easy to do. And I think it is something that we are looking to enlarge or expand through other activities within the biennial. So there will be new workshops. So similar to how this was seeded in some ways, I think seeded in workshops done in 2019. I think creating those opportunities for further thinking that can lead to projects, but may also be of value just through the further thinking.
Sure.
I didn't want to cut you both off because you're having such a
great
conversation.
you have to cut us off. That is you have to.
Yeah, we know one another from way back when I think we were both starting to teach. So we can probably go on for some time. So.
No, that's so great. That's what's nice about this conversation. We got a lot of questions and a lot of comments throughout the conversation. And I think one of the big ones, which I know you've both kind of touched upon, but a lot of questions about the temporal aspect and importance of these installations, and thinking if some of them are going to be staying, how does that affect the purpose of them in the now, and how do they further kind of engage with the community if they become more permanent in these spaces?
That's a question for you, David.
Yeah.
I think so. The majority of the spaces, minus a couple, really have been developed with by first identifying a community organization and reaching out to that organization. They had spaces. So in a way, the available city is more about city-owned vacant lots. So the work that is on more of a vacant lot, that would be like CCA, Wyman's work. Those are in fact former city-owned vacant lots that those organizations had acquired in the past. We're on more hard surfaces than I thought we would be, but that's the spaces that different organizations had that we could begin to utilize and where they had interest in introducing a kind of space. So a few of these are deliberately temporary. When I say that the outpost office work is using paints that aren't permanent. And so I think the hard surface one that was in the same where there was the work by Studio Barnes, the basketball court, that is something that may in fact last into next year. But I think they suspect with weather, it lasts for about 6 months. That's paints that are typically used for sports fields using a GPS guided robot. So they're super ephemeral and really in another project they will do at El Paseo will last for about 3 weeks. But I think to me, those are opportunities for communities to see something different and then also begin to speculate. And so there can be conversations about, well, what might be other spaces in that large hard surface court where there's currently the basketball court and now the play object by Studio Barnes, but how it creates questions and reflection on realizing that that space could have other opportunities too. And so how do they maybe begin to refine those? I think in other cases, in working with the community organizations, it has been an intent that the spaces are something that they either think of as temporary or that they really are saying that they want to and have the capacity to steward, and that's been part of the design development. So these aren't really hypothetical projects by architects that are getting built as pavilions in spaces, that they really are in conjunction with the organizations and really are in conjunction with what the organization was expressing as an interest. So to me, they already in that respect were embedding the potential for their ongoing presence. And I think as ongoing elements, they can continue to stimulate thinking about other types of spaces as well, as Craig was talking about.
Yeah, I think that also kind of plays into what Craig was saying, kind of the city as the participant as well. I really liked when you said that, Craig, kind of the pieces, the installations and the communities also become part of the participant in the exhibition. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more about that.
Well, look, I'm in this field because I love it. I enjoy what I do. I think, the power of architecture is immense. Design in general, perhaps even more immense. But I'm also a Black man, and I grew up in Chicago, and I was lucky enough to perhaps have the kind of support that encouraged me to think beyond my particular experience and my environment. I've been sort of incredibly lucky in that sense, and I will definitely own that. I'm privileged in that sense. So, but I'm also I'm also keenly aware of that privilege, that a lot of people don't have that, and a lot of people who look like me don't have that. And because I enjoy, I think architecture can impact so many things, and design probably more, just design in general. That I don't want to live in a world where being black means I don't recognize design or the power of design, and vice versa. That design doesn't recognize me because I'm Black. And so, the kinds of exhibits that we've had in the past, and sort of typical exhibits as well. I've been to the last two. I didn't go to the first, but the last two. and again, I'm not knocking the venue, right? I mean, there's something to be said about being able to sort of speculate about work and have it in a place where it shows a certain amount of reverence for the process. But I know when I was growing up, I never would have gotten on the train and driven downtown and went downtown to see any of this. I never would have seen it. I would not do it. And I would argue that many Black and brown neighborhoods are not going to do that. You know, going downtown and going into a location like the Foundation or the
Cultural
Athenaeum,
center.
yeah, Cultural Center or the Athenaeum or anything like that. You know, those are not spaces that make me feel comfortable. You know, I don't know how to act there. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what I'm not supposed to do. And now I've also got to engage with, you know, all the other sort of, you know, things that are about the city, the police, and whatever, right? I'm just not going to do that. It's not worth it to me. But if it's in my neighborhood, and if it's about me, it's about how I live, and you're actually interested in talking to me about it, then yeah, I might engage this. I might recognize like, oh man, maybe that's something I want to do. Or maybe that's something that, you know, as a group, we can bring other folks in to do more. So, you know, that to me is sort of the risk that happens with this this exhibit, but it's also the reward.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of glancing at some questions too. I think to me, there's I think somebody's asking a little bit about indoor versus outdoor, how the community's responded. I think that's an ongoing question across the biennial and a little bit beyond. And when I say that, I think
well, the theater is an indoor space,
right? But to me, it's also that while we're activating currently now a little bit more neighborhood by neighborhood compared to the opening weekend, we are also encouraging, really the spaces are there for the organizations to continue to utilize. And so there can be programming there that they are bringing to the spaces that are outside of things that the biennial are organizing. And I think all of them are more or less open access within the community as the organizations, I think, begin to determine. So I think it's a little bit more a question of how do they begin to see adoption in time through activities that take place by each organization, as well as I think how residents begin to appropriate and utilize them through their familiarity. That none of them are gated in any way, and so that's what I mean, that they really are spaces that that are effectively public, even as they are, and that's an intention of the biennial, stewarded and maintained by, or of the available city, stewarded and maintained by community organizations. So in a way, answering how did, rather than saying the city has to try to maintain 10,000 things, can you begin to find local stewards through the spaces? You're also creating a network of local stewards is a kind of intention as well. So to me, it is about what's the adoption of the spaces in time, and maybe a recognition, as Craig was alluding earlier, maybe initially asking, is this a space for me? But perhaps through different activities, starting to recognize that, yes, that is a space for multiple residents, or you may be interested in more in the space next door because of what your particular interest and inclinations are compared to the space that's 2 doors down.
Yeah, that question could, you know, that question, is this space for me? You know, the more someone recognizes that it goes from, is this space for me, to this is my space. it's no longer a question, it's a declaration. And that declaration becomes something that empowers, I want more space. I can do more. We can do more. It's no longer, I'm unsure about whether this is for me. It is like, yes, I want more of this because every other neighborhood in the city has it. Why shouldn't we have the same things? What struck me about, you'll know the name, I don't remember the name, but the site on Pilsen.
El Paseo.
Yeah,
El Paseo Garden.
that is exactly what happened there. Like that entire, like the folks who steward that place are neighborhood volunteers, because they recognize no longer is this for me. It's like, yes, it's for me, and we are going to steward this, and we are going to bring in more things that we as a neighborhood, as a community want. And to me, this is a no-brainer. Why would the city not want that kind of community ownership of space? Like, they don't have to do anything except get out of the way. That can happen in a number of different places.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for being here with us today. And thank you so much to our audience and all your great questions. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but we really hope that you'll be able to join some more of our programs. With the available city, we have activation weekends every weekend in the neighborhoods now through October 31st, where we're highlighting each of the neighborhoods that we're at with different programs. So please check out our website at chicagoarchitecturebiennial.org for more information on upcoming programs. And we will see you next Tuesday for our next In Dialogue series conversation.
If you are close, people, go. You will be well fed. You will have a good time. Go. And if you can't go, hit the website to see the kinds of things that are there, and read sort of the intentions behind them. It's just, again, I don't know. And here I'm making a challenge to the CAB. Don't go back to your formal process. Don't do it. There are thousands of, well, maybe not thousands, but there are lots of exhibits that work that way. There aren't a lot that work this way. This can be, this can identify and separate the Chicago Biennial from everything else that actually happens and actually benefit the city. Don't go backwards. You should only go forward from this point.
I think that's a
Thank you, Craig. I'm giving you the last word.
Thank you so much, everybody. We will see you soon. Have a great evening.
Ciao.